I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of the history of Catholic social teaching, and then focus a little bit on exactly what subsidiarity, which is one of those big long SAT test words, is what exactly that means in terms of the social teaching of the Church. Emily yesterday asked me, she said, if you have any slides, send them my way. And I said, I have no time to make slides today, not before midnight. And I did not want to put that on her. So I said, I will just give a handout today. I said, I have a handout and my notes ready. So we'll just work from the notes that you picked up on your way into class. So I think, as I had mentioned last week, Catholic social teaching, really as social teaching per se, really sort of begins in 1891 with Pope Leo XIII. It was not as if, as we saw last week, looking at the references to the poor in Scripture, in the teaching in Judeo-Christian teaching, really throughout, there's always an emphasis upon the poor and how we are meant to respond to the needs of the poor. And so, it isn't as if Catholic social teaching just sort of like all of a sudden was something that's like, oh, maybe we should do something about this. It has always been rooted in that virtue of charity and the way that we are called to serve one another. But particularly in the 19th century, with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, many of the conditions afflicting workers by the time we get into the latter half of the 19th century, this was a cause that was particularly dear to Pope Leo XIII's heart. He had a great concern for social justice, for the conditions of workers and so forth. And so in 1891, Pope Leo XIII will write the first encyclical on Catholic social teaching called Rerum Novarum, which means, on the new things. Because many new things had arisen within society, a great deal of societal ills. It wasn't as if, the poor were not always among us, but in particular, sort of the rise of particularly social ills, problems with, working conditions, problems with the way in which workers were oftentimes being treated. A great deal of the encyclical was also dedicated to issues regarding, various political systems that had come into being. The encyclical was a condemnation of socialism per se, expressed in Karl Marx as it was beginning. Those ideas were beginning to catch on. The question of it's like, well, okay, in terms of our Christian practice, it's like, is private ownership a good thing or a bad thing? And Pope Leo XIII will say, it's like, no, you can't just go around taking what belongs to other people. That's what we call stealing, and that is a violation of a commandment. However, while he recognized he recognized too that he says, like, well, on the other extreme, we also see other problems. That there can also be a greed that is associated with capitalism. There can be a greed that is associated with other systems that also is not in line with Christian teaching. And so in Rerum Novarum, he begins to orient the Church's social teaching, in that practice of charity. It is really in many ways a very groundbreaking document, because the Church had never really sought to address specific ills within society. It was an encyclical that was trying to apply universal teachings about caring for the poor, really trying to rely upon the Church's whole history of what is the virtue of charity and how is it practiced, and applying it to the specific circumstances of the world at that time. And so periodically from then on, we are continually seeing new encyclicals and new teachings articulated by popes throughout the next 100+ years. So the next one that will come out is on the 40th anniversary of Rerum Novarum, on the new things. Pope Pius XI will write Quadragesimo Anno, literally 40 years later. And in that encyclical, he largely reiterates and again addresses it to the times in which they are living in 1931, seeking to address many of the things that had come about. Now, what has happened in between 1891 and 1931? the Bolshevik Revolution and the rise of communism within Russia, which has had all kinds of ill effects. And so Quadragesimo Anno is addressing the world as it is in 1931. Many of the social movements and political movements within Europe at the time were causing a great deal of consternation. And so Quadragesimo Anno was largely speaking to the issues of that era. Later on, John the 23rd will write Moderate Magistra, the Church as Mother and Teacher, Christianity and Social Progress. Again, seeking to, in what has happened in between there, another world war, the advent of the atomic age, and so he is largely speaking to the Cold War has begun at that point and is at sort of a fever pitch in the early 60s. As he's writing Mater et Magistra. And so he, again, is seeking to address what is a major crisis within the world. Like, what does the church have to say about all of these social problems, about all of these things that are afflicting the human race? Pope Paul VI will continue that teaching on the development of peoples post-Vatican II in 1967. John Paul II, one of his first major encyclicals will be Laborem Exercens on Human Work, which is also written on an anniversary, the 90th anniversary of Rerum Novarum. And John Paul II will also write Centesimus Annus 100 years after Rerum Novarum in 1991, which is really sort of a major encyclical on social teaching. There is a lot of good stuff in John Paul II's teaching on Centesimus Annus, which was written just after the fall of communism, the fall of communist regimes in Russia and in Eastern and Central Europe. And so there were lots of new questions that had arisen in the wake of the end of the Cold War, the different systems of belief and social practice. And so all of those things kind of figured into John Paul II's Centesimus Annus. It was a particular the whole question of social teaching was very important to John Paul II, largely because, as we remember, he was from Poland. Poland was a communist country. He was the first pope who was not Italian to be elected in something like 400, 500 years or something. It had been a very long time since the church had had a non-Italian pope. And John Paul II, it's like, comes out of left field from Poland, and he had experience working with the Solidarity movement. In fact, the end of the Cold War comes about in no small part due to the efforts of John Paul II and many Catholic leaders in Eastern Europe who resisted the communist regime. But we've also seen since then a number of encyclicals as well that have touched upon the question of charity and social justice. Pope Francis, one of his best works is in 2020 he published Fratelli Tutti, an encyclical not in Latin. He wrote it in Italian, hence the title Fratelli Tutti on fraternity and social friendship. Very much, Pope Francis, as he often does, has a very personal touch and a very personal reflection in the way that he gives us these teachings. And Pope Francis, in that very sort of personal way, has a real interest in, it's like, well, what are the bonds that should unite people in the practice of charity, in the way that we are able to coexist with one another. What does that bond look like in terms of the church's social teaching? How is that meant to be put into practice? And one of the things I think as we look at sort of the whole 100+ year now history of Catholic social teaching and how it has evolved is that the reason the church kind of keeps addressing the issue, why there isn't sort of a definitive teaching, boom, like there's no mic drop with social teaching, because the world around us is continually evolving. The church is trying to find answers to new situations that evolve, because human history is always changing as well. Catholic social teaching is not about really sort of embracing any particular economic or political or social doctrine when it comes to a system. Is democracy the best way for people to live? We would say here in the United States, yes. Other cultures, it's very foreign to the way that things are done. When it comes to systems of economics, as John Paul II noted in Centesimus Annus, it's like, well, there were certainly a lot of problems with the centralized planning of communism, the abuses of human rights that have flowed from communism, which we still see to this day in China, and North Korea being a great example of it's like exactly how far that can be taken in terms of controlling people's lives and restrictions upon human freedom. John Paul II had a real concern with preserving the idea of human freedom, but preserving human freedom for a purpose, that we are meant to experience redemption through the gospel, and so we need to be free to be able to follow the path of Christ, that any political system should really be promoting that idea of human freedom, but there's also responsibility that comes with it. That John Paul II could be very critical as well of a kind of unbridled capitalism which does not respect the nature of workers, who treats people in much the same way as communism did, as simply cogs within a machine, and that profit is more important than people. There are, as the church has found, it's like, any political system, any economic system, none of them is going to be perfect because they are all human by design, and therefore they will all have their imperfections. There is no system of government that is perfect. There is no economic system which is not capable of being abused. That even as we try to then apply Christian virtue into all of those things, we also recognize that these are very human constructs in politics and economics, and so finding the perfect system is going to be very challenging. Oftentimes the best we can do is find the system that promotes those things the best that they can be, that sort of allows for the greatest recognition of human dignity, that recognizes the ability for people to grow in what they do. But we should not, there is no, the church does not, in her social teaching, does not endorse any particular system. John Paul II in Centesimus Annus will point out that he says, like, well, it might seem like the democracies and Western capitalism has carried the day after the end of the Cold War, but he said, not so fast. There are problems there too. It should not, even if communism is sort of, back on its heels, he said at the same time we also recognize that capitalism is not perfect either. That there is still a need to respect the dignity of workers. There is still a need to treat people fairly. That it is, it's not winners and losers in the human world are not the way that the church looks at, it's not picking winners and losers within the world or endorsing any particular system, because people are also different all over the world. There is no just one system that is, okay, this is what it ought to be, because all, really, when it comes to those human constructs of political and economic systems, they are all capable. They're all subject, because they are human, to sin. They're all of them subject to the fact that, we as human beings, we can treat each other very badly, whatever our political or economic system is. And so the church has largely been warning now for 130 some years that it's like, it's like, always bear in mind the Christian virtues. Always bear in mind what charity means. And so subsidiarity is really a principle that is very important in Catholic social teaching. When we ask, what does subsidiarity mean? Obviously it has the word in there, the same root as the word subsidy. How do we sort of subsidize something? How do we build it up? And so subsidiarity really is the principle that greater powers should not do what lesser powers are able to do for themselves. But a higher power should be able to create conditions for all people and things to be able to thrive in their proper place. That all of those things are meant to, that society and is able to do things that allow, that essentially what we would kind of call empowerment. That the state does not exist in order to carry out all charity. This was the sort of communist philosophy that the church had condemned, was the idea that it's like, well, it's not my personal responsibility. We're just all in this together, so it's some centralized planning authority that is going to take care of all of those things, and it's not my responsibility. Whereas we would say it's like, well, no, we all have a responsibility toward one another. We all have a responsibility of caring for one another. There are things that the government does best. I mean, there are some things that problems that are too large for individuals or even the church itself to be able to tackle. We are not going to be able to just eradicate poverty. There are certain elements that it's like, yes, it would not be a good idea if, there are all kinds of bad things that can happen when people sort of take things into their own hands. That there are things that are the proper sphere for government action. There are things that are the proper sphere for local organizations or municipal government to handle. But there's a lot as well that is something that is very personal. How do we ourselves practice charity? Because in the end, nothing that higher powers can do should really be taking away our ability to act charitably. It should never be giving us an out to simply say, well, that's not my problem. When it comes to caring for the poor, no, we are our brother's keepers. We are meant to do what we can, even as we recognize that we can't do everything. That there are some needs that we are not able to meet, and it would be more than one person would ever be able to accomplish. It might be more than one local organization is able to accomplish. There are things that are properly addressed at a higher level. But we also should recognize that the higher level is not meant to supplant what is meant to happen at the personal level as well. That it is not the purpose to stifle charity. It is not the purpose to stifle what happens at the local level, because so often subsidiarity as a principle is one that says, you need to listen sort of to what's happening on the ground. To actually be attentive to what are the actual needs to be addressed. I'm sure we all have heard stories of it's like, okay, Ronald Reagan's famous statement about it's like, I'm from the government and I'm here to help, scariest words in the English language, because most of us probably have something of a certain distrust when it comes to the government's ability to fix anything. That it's like, yeah, it can be, but there are things that are best addressed sort of at a national level or a state level or a local level by government. Our participation as people in society should be working toward that goal of a fair and just society by the people that we elect, who we vote for, what public policies we advocate for. But there's also a great deal that just happens on a very personal level. There's a lot that happens on that level of how do I practice charity? And it is not up to me to just simply say it's like well, it's like, I write a check, to a charity. That's not a bad thing. That's also something that is needful, but at the same time, our charity, as we are taught in Scripture, is not meant to be something that is kind of antiseptic, where we're able to simply wash our hands of the problem of the poor. That we are meant to actually look at what is in the world around us. There are these circles all around us of the people that we interact with and that we see on a daily basis. How do we practice charity within our own family? How do we practice charity with those with whom we work? How do we practice charity with the people that we encounter throughout our day, just on the streets or in a shop or wherever we happen to be? That is not something that anybody is able to take action for us. Those are all things that we are called to personally practice in our lives. They're the associations that we form that are meant to help to care for the poor, that we are able to, as a church community, as various groups, as outreach ministry, we are able to come together in order to address certain needs, and we are able to do more as we gather together and as we support one another in those works of charity. We're able to do some bigger things as we come together. And then there are the things that are best addressed by a higher power. But subsidiarity really means that it's like the higher power is not there to sort of take away the opportunity to practice charity on a more local level, because nothing absolves us of our personal need to practice charity. We're never able to simply say, well, there's nothing I can do about that, so it's like, or I don't want to do anything about that, and therefore it's like it's the government's problem. It's like, well, no, we are all in this together, and subsidiarity is the idea that yes, there are some times that the higher power needs to be helping those at a lower level to be able to do the things that help build a more just society, that are helping us to actually do more. That it is not simply looking to someone else to be able to fix the problem. And so really I think what we are really looking at is, and what can be helpful to us when we think about subsidiarity, when we think about charity, with the practice of charity in our lives, especially as it relates to sort of if we think of almsgiving in a more general way of how do we practice charity, it always really begins on a very personal level. It's like, what am I doing to practice charity? And again, thinking in terms of those circles that move outward, what are the things that are right in front of me in my own life? Hearing confessions, one of the things I oftentimes, we'll talk about with people in councils is it's like, yes, we frequently treat our family members less charitably than we would treat a stranger on the street, because we kind of feel like our family members will give us a pass on saying something snarky or being critical. Or I said, we probably shouldn't do that. I said, we shouldn't assume that we're not wounding a family member because, we know them well and they'll be able to realize that we're just joking or something. I said, we would never, some of the things we say to our family members are not things we would say to, the clerk at Quick Trip. That we would, we look at the way that people treat other people, and we are meant to always treat them with dignity. And that is something that is rooted in that virtue of charity, in the way that we are practicing charity in our lives. And we should not take things for granted. We should not assume that there is somebody higher up than us who is taking care of this problem. I think that we need to begin by looking at immediately what is around us and asking ourselves personally, what can I do about this? Realizing that we are not, as an individual, going to be able to solve all of the problems in the world around us. The government is not able to solve all of the problems, even if they wanted to, in the world around us. But at the same time, realizing what is proper to those various levels is an important part of subsidiarity. What is the right approach to be tackling a particular problem, and not either passing it up the food chain as if it's somebody higher up's responsibility to worry about these things, but also for higher powers not to be stifling that work of charity that happens with those who are sometimes closest to the problem, who encounter it in a personal way, because they oftentimes know a lot more than somebody sitting at a desk philosophizing about how to best help the poor. And so subsidiarity is really something that is meant to foster those bonds of fraternal charity among the human race. As Pope Francis expresses it beautifully in his encyclical on fraternity and social friendship from a few years back. We are all human beings living on this planet together. How do we, abiding by that principle of subsidiarity, grow those bonds of charity, those bonds of fellowship, looking out for one another, that we might be able to live in a more just world? And so with that, I will turn it over to Jackie.
Thank you, Father. I don't know how he keeps that up here and keep it all organized. He's so well spoken, and so thank you for sharing that gift with us. It's a tough act to follow at times. Okay, let me move this over here. So I may kind of double up on what Father has said, but I want to kind of bring it down into a local point of focus here. So let's see, we'll go right here. Yeah. Okay. So in this session of Catholic social teaching subsidiarity today, you're going to learn how solidarity and subsidiarity go hand in hand, the good news of the gospel, what kind of poverty does Cosmo see? And I'm going to stop right there before I go any further. Cosmo, the word Cosmo is an acronym. It's an acronym for Church of St. Mary Outreach. So when you hear the word Cosmo, that's what we're always referencing to, okay? And then number 4, incorporate and apply the teaching in your current life situations. And then Cosmo subsidiarity, practical applications, and where do we go from here? So our overview, we are social beings because God willed it so. We live with others and for others. We all have talents and resources needed by others and from others. The wisdom of these key principles of the Catholic social teaching, such as subsidiarity, that's such a hard word to say sometimes. It's a tongue twister. It invites us to live the gospel in every aspect of our lives. Now I'm going to slow down here because I want you to really, this is a lot of unpacking, okay? Because our brains sometimes aren't geared this way. I know our hearts are, but sometimes there's a disconnect because our secular world will want us not to connect the dots. So I'm just going to kind of slow down and try to bring the train together, okay? So God has the most beautiful laid plans for us. When we are in alignment with His will, life has an organic way of being filled with the ebb and flow of shared experiences. We are all here to support and fulfill each other's journeys. Each of us have both freedom and moral responsibility to pursue our own personal vocation while also supporting the freedom and moral responsibility of others on their journey of what God's called them to do. So if you look at it, I'm going to slow down and say this. The human person is the foundation and purpose of all social and political life. The human person is the foundation and purpose of all social and political life. So, solidarity and subsidiarity. I know, she's laughing at me back there. It is. It's a tongue twister. Yeah. They go hand in hand. So I'm gonna kind of make a contrast here. So just kind of follow this thought with me, would you? Solidarity is the essential response to Christ's commandment to love one another. We are called to support and advocate for the marginalized, vulnerable, and those facing unjust conditions. Subsidiarity is the key principle that we are called to support those that are treated unfairly in our communities and create solutions within our communities. So, these two principles cannot be separated. As hard as we try to separate them, they cannot be separated. They are like water and ice. They're made from the same molecule, H2O. Ice can only be ice, but water can transform into ice when the right conditions are met. Now I'm going to read that again. These two principles can't be separated. They are like water and ice, made of the same H2O molecule. Ice can only be ice, but water can transform into ice when the right conditions are met. So, solidarity can only be a society standing together to advocate for the marginalized. But what good is solidarity when there's no support by the community to uphold the dignity of humans? As the water molecule, solidarity is transformed into subsidiarity when the right conditions are met or present. So what that means is that we are the answer. You are the right conditions. You are the solid rock of the ice, the subsidiarity. I was going over that concept with my new cohort. She says, wow, that's really deep. It is deep because it's a deep issue. I mean, if you understand what God's laid for us, his path forward, it's so deep and so rich and so full of content. And so in just a few minutes, we're going to apply this. We're going to show the actual application of what this looks like. So, what kind of poverty does Cosmo see? Now, I'm going to say this because I want to show this to you as an example. I said this last week, and I want to bring it back up because this is how to organize the chaos of poverty when we apply the principle of subsidiarity, okay? So what kind of poverty does Cosmo see? The number one is material deprivation and human misery. Now, this is not an all-inclusive list. This is just the top of the list that we see every day. Clothing, personal hygiene, household essentials, shoes, communication devices, housing, transportation, loneliness, unsafe housing conditions, homelessness, generational poverty, human trafficking. Number two, physical and psychological illnesses, infected wounds, disabilities, obesity, cancer, hit-and-run victims, depression, addiction, unmanaged personality disorders, anxiety. Number three, unjust and spiritual oppression, slumlords, gangs, discrimination, evictions, domestic violence, sex trafficking, demonic infestations, demonic possessions, and inherited conditions of original sin. Sit in that for a moment. The Cosmos Center witnesses that every day, on a daily basis. Yes?
Say what you mean by inherited conditions of original sin.
That would be like symptoms of sin. It was inherited. It was the fallen nature. It was the, Adam and Eve structure. Yeah, we all have that.
It's hard to put a condition on that you would see in somebody.
I would agree with you. We see it daily, so I probably do use that a lot. And if you aren't in that world daily, it would be a little bit confusing. So I'll see if I can't help you understand that as we move forward, okay? And if I don't, I would love to continue a conversation with you afterwards, okay?
Jack,
Yes.
if I may, would it be like something like just saying that someone who is coming in for help is rude to one of the workers that's trying to help them? They're rude because of the original sin.
Yeah, that would be
Is that sort of along the lines of what you're...
Yeah, that would be a good example of that. Good example, thank you. So we do experience this on a daily basis. So the stories that are told are horrific in nature. So we hear these stories all the time. And to understand the gravity of the daily living conditions that our neighbors endure are truly gut-wrenching. The worst part of these stories is that our neighbors, our clients, they accept this as their truth. That's hard to see sometimes. It's hard to see. So our motto at Cosmo, we adopted a motto, and it's a beautiful testament to the courage and endurance that our clients persevere through. And the motto is, every person has a story, and every story exposes the glory of God. Through their storytelling, we are compelled to act on their behalf to right what is wrong. So it's a natural instinct to become an advocate for those in need. So when our clients walk into the building, we wonder about how we should respond to their particular type of poverty. They live in squalor and in fear, and feel powerless to change their conditions and circumstances. And we recognize that solidarity has failed them because there's no rock of subsidiarity for them to stand on. So Cosmo is that rock of subsidiarity for our clients. So, by following the principle of subsidiarity, Cosmo and our neighbors feel empowered to stand in solidarity with the families living in fear and squalor. And together, we can devise a path forward. So what we've done, the Cosmo has opened up a new, it's not a department, but a new place for our Justice and Peace Committee to develop. And this has been kind of working in the wings for about the last 3 or 4 years. So we have an organized a leader already who wants to help organize this. She's been doing all the legwork, and she's ready to do all of the things that she can do that she knows that Cosmo can do. So she's waiting for us to develop this. My invitation to you is to pray about this and to think about if you would like to be a part of this, to help our conditions that we see our people in, to help us right that wrong. So I'm going to move into a different field here. We're going to go into a focal point, and I want to use this as an example of how the application of subsidiarity works. So, corporal works of mercy. Number one, shelter the homeless. So, I know you guys drive around, you see, our city has a problem. Our city has a problem. Think about the homelessness growing in Tulsa. Being homeless is one of the best examples where the principles of subsidiarity has been overlooked. When we ignore the simplest needs of our brothers and sisters, shelter the homeless, we commit sin. Tulsa is doing some risky business now. It's not flourishing. If Tulsa is not flourishing, our homeless are not cared for, we're really walking a very risky walk. Now, we do have a new mayor who has come on board and has a wonderful initiative for our homeless population. So, for him to do that alone, it's an overwhelming feat. He needs helpers. He needs people. He needs this principle of subsidiarity to step in the gap. He needs us. He needs you. He needs all the citizens to address this issue, because it's not just local, it's citywide. So let's think about this deeper, okay? Let's just unpack homelessness here. A homeless person is no longer housed because of trauma, crisis, or a major life event. When they choose to live unhoused, they become extremely vulnerable. At first, they don't know how to be homeless, and so they buddy up with another homeless person, so they learn the ropes. So they friend somebody out there. Once they are acclimated to the streets, their wounds from the trauma crisis or major life events are magnified 1,000 times. And then the citizens start to look at them differently. Business owners deny them services or goods. The communities are not welcoming them. They're thinking not only to protect their property and children, And then once the rejection starts from the community, the pain becomes unbearable. The homeless are tempted to numb themselves with drugs and alcohol, and then when they're inebriated or high, they forget who they were once and lose their dignity. They do things that hurt or harm and destroy themselves or others. You can see that they neither have the support of solidarity or subsidiarity. They have fallen through the cracks because the lack of subsidiarity has failed them. And what are we to do? What are we to do? I'm going to invite you to kind of think about that, okay? So think about the homelessness here in Tulsa using the principle of subsidiarity. Would we have a better outcome? Would we have better results? Okay, so I'm going to invite you to think about this. How does this change your view of homelessness and homeless people? And I would like to open this dialogue up. I would like to hear from you. This is where we're going to practice a mastermind. Like, what solutions can you think of using this subsidiarity principle to help our homeless population? Here at 61st or 49th and Peoria. Anybody have any suggestions or ideas? There's no right or wrong answers. There's nothing. When we open up the dialogue, it allows us to start to think the dignity of the human. We get to be able to stand in solidarity, like, I want to help you. What is the best way I can help you? What is the best way we can help you? So we make peace out of this. We make chaos out of this life right here, restore the dignity, and then how do we do that? Anybody have any answers for me? Dave, you look like you got a good one.
So, there's the initial trauma, and then you walk through problem after problem. It's like a shell.
Yes.
A shell around a shell. That's such a difficult question to answer. How do you start unwinding that shell? How do you start unwinding those problems? You could say, okay, we're going to have an army of counselors to help work on the mental part. But I don't know. It's a very difficult question.
Yeah, it is.
If there was an answer, it would have been.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's one of the toughest answers. It's one of the toughest issues to address.
And all homeless people are different.
Yes.
It's a complex. There's some people who they're simply because they've lost their job.
Yes.
And then there's others who are too paranoid to ever want to be around other people.
Yes.
It's a complex, not just give them a place to live. It's not going to work just here's a house. It's not going to work.
Yes.
I can tell you, I'm a counselor for Life Senior Services.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this list of things that, is huge. And people don't know that service is out there. Because of the things that I do for them, I tend to get the train wrecks.
Yeah.
And it's like spaghetti. You've got to find an end, and you've got to start going in and unraveling their string of, I've been here, I've been there, they hurt me, whatever, until you can find something. And I promise those people when they come in, something I think I can do. I promise you, you will feel better when you leave than when you came in. I think that is a right approach. I think that is a very dignified approach to acknowledge somebody's hurt, somebody's trauma, somebody's wounded, right? And that's a beautiful way to approach that, because you apply that subsidiarity and solidarity. You give a sacred space to that person to just be them for just a moment and to recognize themselves. Yeah, I've been wounded.
I have a question for you, since you've had a lot of conversations with folks in the area who are homeless. From my perspective and my understanding of what we're talking about here today, I feel addressed with subsidiarity, because it feels like it's addressed on a really local level to me. Like it's a citywide, like we talked about the mayor's initiatives, I know we've got city lights building, I know we got Eden Village, like there's a lot happening. And when I see folks who are homeless, what I don't know, that I'm hoping you know, is like, do they already know usually about the resources? Has someone already connected them and it has just been like it's not working for them? Or is there like a gap in communication and knowledge? Like, would it be helpful if I see someone who's homeless and I'm like, hey, here's a resource, or do they already know?
That's a very good, that's a great approach. The more they know, the more we talk about resources for them, that is awesome.
Like,
That is awesome.
They already all know about them.
They don't know all of the resources out there. In fact, their friends out on the street, and I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound rude, but I don't want to be rude. I just want to show this as an example. Misery loves misery. So a friend out on the street is going to try and keep this friend out on the street with them so they can stay together in their solidarity of their woundedness and trauma. So there's the forces out there that are working against those people improving and bettering their lives. So to answer your question, I think we do have a lot of resources in Tulsa. We do. I think homelessness, from my personal experience with just visiting and talking with our population, is a mindset. It's a mindset. When my friend was ready to address his homelessness, his poverty, his wounds, his addictions, his mental capacity that was lost during his homelessness, when he finally changed his mind about that, he was housed. So it's a mindset to me. I really feel like it's a mindset. Now, with that, he had support, though. He had support of people saying, you're worth it.
Is this down?
Yes, thank you. I spoke of Dow last weekend in my, I don't know if you were here. It looks like maybe everybody was here last weekend. So yeah, he had support along the way. It didn't happen overnight, which we'd like to see it happen overnight. But when a homeless person is that traumatized, it's hard. It's like you say, it's like hard. It's such a complex thing. It's the spaghetti. You have to just kind of be constantly taunting that piece of spaghetti. Don't break it because it's fragile, because you still want that connection. You want the end of you want the meatball at the end of the spaghetti, right? You want that to still be good. So, right, what we've just done, so we've found several solutions already locally here at 49th and Peoria. So this is an example of a mastermind session of working and using the principle of subsidiarity. Now, 2 solutions we just came up with. We found some things that would stop us from doing it because it is complex. It is large. When I think about it by myself, no, I cannot do this. This is too big of an issue for me to wrap my little brain around. But with you, there's possibilities. There's possibilities. Because we have support. We have brilliant brains. We all have the common good of what God's design is for each other. So we fall into this wonderful and beautiful place that subsidiarity in our local area, we have an opportunity to eradicate homelessness from someone's life. Yes, Mary?
You know, working at the Cosmo Center, I know I'm there on Mondays, but there's a resource list that you give out to people when they come in.
Yes.
Would there be a way to have something that we can hand out to people on the street?
As personally, when you're like driving down the road, absolutely. I have a resource booklet, a binder that it's unique to Cosmo. We've done our due diligence of finding resources that are current, up to date, and helpful for our population that we see here at 49th and Peoria. So I do have resource sheets, and I can always take them and leave them in the information desk in the vestibule, so you can just come and grab a stack full. And when you are driving down the street and you're at that stoplight, and here's the homeless person, you have something that you can give them. The more they know about the resources, the more that they will tend to gravitate to them. So they don't feel like they're alone.
Does that have contact information for
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, it does. Yes, Terry.
The resources that you have is plenty. We give it out. Lance does the phone calls over there, and he always gives it out, the resources. But something opened our eyes on Friday. Not all of them gives out the love that Cosmo, that St. Mary gives out to the people. Because when Lance gave them the resource, they started crying because they didn't help. And they started crying. They said they were treated like dirt over there. And
Not at Cosmo, at other agencies.
they want to come back to Cosmo because we don't do it. But we need more people to give that love
Yeah.
to them. They need to see it and to feel it. When I pass out my bags on second and fourth Saturday, the eyes just light up. Thank you.
It's the
Really that touch.
It's the recognition of their soul, of them being the person that God's designed them to be. We see that in them. Yes, I'll get back with you.
I don't want to get us off track if you've got a lot more to talk about, but
I've got 5 minutes. I've got 6 more slides, Dave. But no, please.
well, I was just going to say, it occurs to me that, institutions aren't going to solve homelessness. You can give all kinds of resources, but what you're saying and what you're saying is people need love. People need
Yes.
they need to know they're loved.
Yes.
That's the charity.
That's the crux.
Charity is love.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the subsidiarity really what it needs to do is to promote the solidarity. It needs to help those who are willing to not hand out stuff but walk along with.
So do you see how solidarity and subsidiarity, they cannot be separated? They go hand in hand. So we're going to move on to the next slide. So thank you all for participating. Wonderful thoughts. Sorry, go.
Just one thing, how many people do you find cannot read?
A lot.
You can hand out a list, but if they can't read it,
Exactly. We find that a lot. We have ways to overcome that. So that's a poverty. That's an oppression. So that's lack of education and lack of care to educate also. So, okay, so we're going to move on to the next slide. So what can we do? So we're talking about what we can do. We can engage in your local church, your parish, or civic activities, okay? So as the mayor is starting to roll out all these new initiatives, I'm just really, waiting to hear what he's got going on. And of course, it takes time to develop and it takes time to organize. So he needs some support. So whether you feel called to do something on a civic level or come back into a local portion of our area, our vicariate, to work with Cosmo or other charities around us, I would invite you to explore that and what that looks like. So we can solve the problems that are unique to our area at the lowest competent level by engaging with our local churches, our parish, or town. The issues will usually resolve when the support is given to uphold the common good and the dignity of the human body. Engaging means becoming active by volunteering, advocating, and through leadership. Churches and parishes need engagement. They need us. They need you. The church needs you to be engaged of the good news of the gospel. It is upheld when the good news of the gospel is upheld, all issues and all resolves are gone. Without your participation, the principle of subsidiarity dissolves, and the community will begin to look for other sources, such as a bigger government. And we all know that sometimes that's not the best answer for what happens locally. So I'm going to try and plow through these real quick because this is kind of fun and exciting about what we're doing and what we're looking forward to. Cosmo has partnered up with, I know I misspelled that word up there, I just caught that a few minutes ago. Cosmo has developed a relationship with a community, with an organization called Action Tulsa. I don't know if anybody is familiar with that, but it is an organization that helps us go from a local standpoint and bridge together the gaps. We bridge it and be able to work together as a community in an organized manner and way. So this organization has helped us, Cosmo, take a better look at the stories that we've heard from our clients and explore the options of how we can serve better and what other organizations are doing in their communities to serve better. So what we did last year, I'll use this as an example. Not last year, I think we did it during COVID, but we organized a neighborhood walk. I don't know if anybody was here and did that neighborhood walk, but it turned out really great. We had about 25 to 30 volunteers that showed up, and what the gist of it was, they went out with little clipboards and they went door to door, and in this neighborhood and then across the street down to Riverside. And we asked questions because we were curious about what our neighbors were experiencing. We were curious to hear what they were, what issues they had. We were curious on is the church missing something? Because we can see something clearly as day and say, oh, you need this, you need that, you need this. But in reality, that's what we think. But really, if we listen to our neighbors and hear what they have to say, it will change us and change how we serve, because it's not how we think they need to. You need to change. You need to cut your grass. You need to, so you kind of go on that tangent. So what we learned was something so beautiful that helped design our Cosmo Center. So in that, we learned that the surprise was that the crime and homelessness were the two top issues that our neighbors were facing on a daily basis. So, I don't think you guys are surprised, but I was surprised because I didn't realize that the homeless had gone into our neighborhoods and was stealing the little kids' bikes or sleeping in someone's backyard under their canopy because it was out of the elements, and they wake up and surprise, boom, there's a stranger on your front door and all of that kind of stuff. So I was kind of shocked by that. I didn't realize that they weren't utilizing the shelters downtown. Not at 49th and Peoria. We don't have a shelter at 49th and Peoria. So that is just an example. Our first example of a subsidiarity is just trying to find out, to listen, to have a listening session. So what we're developing now, and we're going to be moving forward into these projects, there's 5 of them. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes time to develop. So we're learning this with our Action Tulsa community. One, Marshall Elementary has let me see if I wrote it down here. It has over 80% dropout. This is elementary, right down here, 55th and Peoria. 80% dropout. Now, I think that was a number back in 2018, I think. But that is due to poor living conditions, it's due to incarceration, it's due to families that aren't working, that are sick and ill. So one of the things that we'd like to develop is this relationship with Marshall Elementary. How can we support the families? How can we support those children in their poverty? So we're looking to target some type of a relationship with them. I don't know what that's going to look like, but we have things in the works. Action Tulsa is also going into the immigration. So the immigration for the people that are facing deportation, right now, they struggle with the law. We want to support in a lawful manner, but we want to support what that immigrant goes through and understands what that is and what that looks like. Now, I know these are deep issues, but they are happening here in Tulsa. We go to safe housing and education and mental health. Those all three kind of merge together, and that is a huge issue, and that is still in development. But we need masterminding. We need that subsidiarity to step into these projects so we can talk about it and develop it. What's our best foot forward with this? We also have slumlords and evictions. That's one of my biggest, that's my biggest thing right there. It just hurts my heart to hear the stories of our clients coming in and tell us about the conditions that they live in. So the stray dogs. I know you think, what is stray dogs on there? What does that mean? Well, stray dogs do a lot of things. So if our neighbors are experiencing how they conduct their lives because there's stray dogs running around and stuff like that. Stray dogs, believe it or not, are the reason why schools are experiencing absenteeism and interrupting recess time. Cyclists are also reporting hazardous bike trails, and mail carriers and animal welfare even comment on the depth of the current stray dog issue. So you can see how it just by a stray dog, what kind of disruption that gives. So there's people kind of, will walk around a stray dog, right? They don't know if it's vicious, it's going to bite them or anything like that. So it kind of hinders their daily activity. So, but absenteeism from school, from a stray dog? Yeah, I mean, these are real things. Real things. So anyway, I would invite you, in conclusion, we are at the end, so I think I'm about a couple minutes over. In conclusion, I just want to reaffirm what Father Stuart taught us a few moments ago. The proclamation of Jesus Christ, the good news of salvation. Love, justice, and peace is not readily received in today's world, devastated as it is by the war, poverty, and injustices. For this very reason, the men and women of our day have greater need than ever of the gospel, of the faith that saves, of the hope that enlightens, and the charity that loves. When we follow and respect the principles of this Catholic teaching, such as subsidiarity, we learn, teach, and witness the faith of our Lord's love for us. So I only can speak of what our parish is doing on our local and community and neighborhood area, because we do stand in solidarity with other organizations such as Catholic Charities. And you're at Life Senior Services. Are you at Life Senior Services? Other organizations, we stand in solidarity, but wherever you decide to get involved, I invite you to first look at your most local area and then see if that's a good fit for you. If it is, engage. Just do it. It'll be the best thing ever. So thank you. That's it. Thank you for coming this morning. And thank you for participating. I know that's a tough issue. Emily, do you have anything to say?
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, okay.